My older sister Jessica has a talent for making any occasion about her, especially when she's the one celebrating. Tonight was no exception. We were seated at the Nautilus, the most acclaimed seafood restaurant in the city, for a dinner celebrating her twin daughters, Chloe and Mia, who had just gained admission to their dream colleges. "Everyone, you absolutely must indulge in the Lobster Thermidor," Jessica announced with a sweeping gesture, her smile radiating pride for her two perfect girls. My son Leo, who is 15 and generally a quiet soul, glanced up from his menu. "Could I maybe get the lobster too?" he asked, his voice soft. Jessica's smile tightened at the edges, a subtle shift only I could recognize. "Oh, Leo, honey, that's a little on the pricey side," she cooed, her tone dripping with saccharine sweetness. "And tonight is really all about the girls, you know." A few moments later, our server, a young woman named Sarah, approached to take our orders. When she reached my son, Jessica cut in before he could even open his mouth. "Just tap water for him," she instructed Sarah, not even looking at Leo. "We don't feed extras." Extras. The word just hung there in the opulent air of the restaurant, heavy and sharp and unbelievably cruel. I watched my son's gaze drop to the crisp white tablecloth. He was blinking rapidly, a telltale sign he was fighting back tears. I turned my head slowly and looked directly at my sister. I let the silence stretch out between us, a taut wire of unspoken history. Then I gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod. My voice, when I finally spoke, was cold and crystal clear. "Noted." Jessica smiled, a triumphant little smirk, clearly believing she had just put me back in my place. She was so very wrong. I wasn't done. I wasn't even close. Before we get any further into this, I'd love it if you could hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and maybe leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. That single word, extras, stung, but it didn't shock me. In the constellation of my family, I had always been the extra, the dim star orbiting my sister's brilliant sun. Jessica is 2 years my senior, and growing up, she was everything I wasn't. She was the straight A student. I was the B and C student. She played piano concertos at recitals to thunderous applause. I holed up in my room drawing in sketchbooks my mother dismissed as a pointless hobby. "Rebecca, why can't you just be more like your sister?" My mother, Eleanor, would sigh across the dinner table. "Jessica has a future. What are you going to do with your life? Doodle." Jess was flawless. She was beautiful, intelligent, and she followed the life script our mother had written for her to the letter. She attended a prestigious university, met a man with a trust fund, and had a storybook wedding where I stood beside her as the maid of honor, squeezed into an atrocious peach-colored dress she'd chosen. I looked like a washed-out ghost next to her radiant glow. My journey was different. I was the aimless one, the black sheep. The idea of a 4-year university bored me to tears. What I loved was food. I loved the precise chemistry of baking. I found a job in a little neighborhood bakery, and for the first time, I felt like I belonged somewhere. The smell of fresh bread at dawn, the feel of dough coming to life under my hands, it was magic. My mother, of course, was appalled. "You're a baker?" she'd say, the word tasting like ash in her mouth. "Rebecca, that's a job for people with no other choices. You were meant to be someone." Then, at 24, I found out I was pregnant. It wasn't planned. The father, a man I had naively thought I loved, vanished the moment I told him, not ready for the reality of fatherhood. I was suddenly alone. When I broke the news to my family, the expression on my mother's face wasn't anger or even sadness. It was pure, unadulterated embarrassment. "What will I tell people?" she whispered. That was her very first thought. Jessica was even worse. Her eyes were filled with a condescending pity. Well, Becca, she'd said, sighing dramatically, I guess you've really made a mess of things this time. Don't you worry. I'm sure I can dig up some of my old maternity clothes for you. But I wasn't a mess. I was terrified, yes, but deep down I was also thrilled. The moment Leo was born, I looked into his tiny face and knew my life was no longer aimless. He was my purpose. He was my entire world. My family, however, began treating me like their personal charity case. Every Christmas, Jessica would write me a check, announcing loudly, "This is for Leo." I know how much you must be struggling. She'd pass on bags of hand-me-downs from her friends' children, clothes that were often worn out and stained. My mother would visit my small apartment and click her tongue at my second-hand furniture. This sofa is so shabby, Rebecca. It's just tragic. They boxed me into a narrative of the poor, struggling single mom, the failed daughter who worked in kitchens. It was easier for them that way. What they never bothered to find out was that I wasn't just working in kitchens. I was studying them. I was a sponge. I saved every single dollar I could, working double shifts until my body ached. I learned inventory management, menu costing, and staff training. I learned how to run a business from the ground up. When Leo turned 7, I had finally saved enough. I bought a beat-up, rusty old food truck. I sanded it down and painted it bright blue myself, christening it Becca's Bites. My days started at 4 in the morning. I'd get Leo ready for school, drop him off, and then drive my truck to a busy downtown corner. I'd cook all day, pick Leo up, and we'd do his homework together on a milk crate in the back of the truck while I counted the day's earnings. Some nights, I'd only made $60. The exhaustion was bone deep, but I never ever gave up. Slowly, one truck turned into 2. The food trucks evolved into a small, bustling cafe. The cafe received a glowing review in the local paper, and suddenly, people were lining up down the street. I opened a second location. Then, 18 months ago, I saw the listing. The Nautilus was for sale. It was the city's culinary landmark, a legendary institution, and it was failing, run into the ground by owners who had lost their passion. I knew I could save it. I took the biggest gamble of my life. I sold both of my cafes, liquidated my assets, and poured every penny I had into buying the Nautilus. I poached the brilliant chef Julian Croft from a Michelin-starred restaurant in Chicago. We completely overhauled the menu. I retrained the entire staff. I worked 20-hour days, with Leo often sleeping on a small cot in my back office. For the first 6 months, I was certain I was headed for bankruptcy, but I wasn't. Tonight, the Nautilus is the most profitable and celebrated restaurant in the city. I also own 2 other successful bistros. I am not poor Becca. I am a business owner. I am a success. But my family never saw it. They never saw the grit, the sleepless nights, the sheer force of will. They never even asked. Why would they? In the story they'd written for me, I was the permanent failure. It was a comfortable role for me to play. It made Jessica feel more accomplished, and my mother feel justified in her lifelong disappointment. So, when Jessica had called to arrange this dinner, I let her believe her own fiction. "Becca," she'd said, her voice laced with magnanimity, "I'm taking the family to the Nautilus to celebrate the girls. It's frightfully expensive, but you and Leo should come. My treat, of course. It'll be good for you to see how the other half lives." My treat? I simply agreed to come. I let her make the reservation in her name. I let her stride into my restaurant as if she owned the place. And now, sitting at this table, listening to her dismiss my son as an extra, I felt that old familiar chill creep into my bones. For a moment, I was 15 again, the invisible girl, the one who didn't count. But I wasn't 15, and I was anything but invisible. The dinner was an excruciating performance of my family's dysfunction. My sister Jessica and my mother Eleanor held court at the center of the table, their laughter and voices loud, establishing themselves as the protagonists of the evening. My nieces, Chloe and Mia, were the supporting actresses, perfect little echoes of their mother, scrolling through their phones and talking about their college plans. "The dorms at the Honors College are simply divine," Chloe said. "They're like miniature private suites." "Oh, that's just marvelous, sweetheart," my mother gushed, her eyes sparkling with a kind of adoration I had never seen directed at me. Not once, not even on the day I brought my own child home from the hospital. Leo and I were relegated to the role of the silent audience, positioned at the far end of the table. No one addressed us. My son is a good kid, kind, sensitive, and observant. He made a genuine effort to connect. "That's really cool, Chloe," Leo said, looking up from his glass of tap water. "What are you planning to major in?" Jessica talked right over him, as if he hadn't made a sound. "Oh, Mother, you should have seen the acceptance letter." The dean of the university signed it personally. He wrote that Mia's essay on leadership was one of the finest he's ever read. Leo's face crumpled. He looked down at the table, taking a long sip of his water. I watched him physically shrink, trying to make himself smaller to avoid being hurt. A hot, slow-burning anger began to smolder in my chest. It was an anger I had carried my entire life. Sarah, the server, returned. "Are we ready to think about some appetizers?" she asked with a smile. "Yes," Jessica declared, taking command. "We will have 3 orders of the oysters Rockefeller, the grand charcuterie board, and let's do the seared calamari as well. Extra crispy." Sarah dutifully wrote it all down. "Wonderful. And for you, ma'am?" she asked, turning to me. "I'm fine for now, thank you," I said. "And for the young man?" she asked, smiling kindly at Leo. Before Leo could answer, Jessica waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, he's fine. He can wait for the main course." Sarah looked momentarily confused. "No appetizer for him, ma'am?" "That's what I said," Jessica snapped, her voice firm. The discussion was over. Sarah glanced at me, and I gave her a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. This wasn't her battle. I would handle it. The appetizers arrived, a veritable feast. Gleaming platters of oysters, a massive board laden with artisanal meats and cheeses, a steaming bowl of perfectly fried calamari. The food was all placed in the center of the table, directly in front of Jessica and my mother. They dug in, passing plates among themselves. "Mom, this goat cheese is to die for," Mia said. "Try the oysters, girls." "They're a true delicacy," my mother urged. Not a single plate was offered to my son. He just sat there, his hands folded in his lap, watching them eat. I watched them too. My body was perfectly still. I just observed. Leo noticed a small basket of fresh bread near his end of the table. He slowly reached out to take a piece. Jessica saw the movement. She let out a light, tinkling laugh that sounded like breaking glass. "Oh, honey, no," she said, pulling the breadbasket away from him and sliding it closer to her daughters. "You should save your appetite. We wouldn't want you to be too full for dinner, if you even get any." I stared at Jessica. "He didn't have an appetizer, Jess." She just shrugged, popping an oyster into her mouth. "He can eat when he gets home," she said, as if Leo wasn't even there, as if he were a ghost. "This is a celebration. It's for the winners." That was it. That was the moment. I felt something in my chest give a small, cold click. It was the sound of a lock turning for the final time. I looked at my sister's happy, oblivious face, relishing her petty power, enjoying the act of making my son feel small. She had done this to me my whole life, She was the winner. I was the loser. She was the star. I was the extra. But this wasn't her stage. This wasn't her world. This was mine. I sat back in my chair, took a sip of my own water, sparkling, which she hadn't even registered, and I waited. I let them eat. I let them laugh. I let them savor their moment. It was the last one they were going to get. I just had to wait for the main course. The main courses were delivered with choreographed precision. Sarah and another server approached our table, a silent and graceful ballet. They placed the food down, 4 magnificent lobster thermidors gleaming under the soft, ambient light of the restaurant. The rich golden brown crust, the vibrant red of the shells, the delicate aroma of sherry and cream. One was set before Jessica, one before my mother, one before Chloe, one before Mia. Then Sarah placed a small, simple house salad in front of me. I had ordered it specifically. My appetite had vanished. She looked at Leo. His place setting was still barren, save for the glass of tap water. He was staring at the lobsters, and I could see the raw hunger in his eyes. He was a 15-year-old boy, growing constantly, and he was being systematically starved in public by his own family. My mother, my sister, and my nieces were oblivious. They were too absorbed in their own performance. "Oh, it's just exquisite," my mother cooed. "Mia, Mia, get a picture of me with the lobster," Chloe demanded, posing with her fork aloft. They cracked the shells. They dipped the succulent meat in clarified butter. They moaned with pleasure. "I told you, Mother," Jessica said through a mouthful of food, "the absolute best in the city." I just watched them. I watched them devour their $100 entrees. I watched my son watch them, his jaw tight, fighting so hard not to show his hurt. I felt a rage so cold and quiet, it was almost serene. And then I saw him. Through the large glass partition of the main dining room, I spotted Chef Julian Croft emerging from the kitchen. He was tall and imposing in his pristine white chef's coat, his expression serious. He was my head chef, my first and most important hire, the best culinary artist in the state, whom I had lured away from a famous restaurant in Chicago. He was beginning his nightly rounds, moving from table to check on his guests. This was my cue. Jessica was in the middle of a long, rambling story about one of her daughter's award-winning essays. My mother was hanging on her every word, nodding and smiling. I didn't say, "Excuse me." I didn't wait for a pause in the conversation. I simply raised my hand. It was a small, calm, but firm gesture. "Chef?" I called out. My voice wasn't loud, but it was clear and carried across the room, slicing right through Jessica's monologue. The table went silent. Forks paused midair. Jessica glared at me, her face flushed with annoyance. "Rebecca, what are you doing?" "Don't bother the staff, it's so tacky." "Honestly, Rebecca," my mother added, her voice a harsh whisper, "what could you possibly need? Don't make a scene." They assumed I was about to complain. They thought I was going to embarrass them. Chef Julian looked over and saw my raised hand. He began to walk towards our table, his expression professional yet slightly puzzled. He didn't recognize me at first. I was dressed down, just another patron. He arrived at our table. "Ma'am," he said politely, "is everything to your satisfaction this evening?" I gave him a small, warm smile. It was a smile he knew well, from long meetings and late-night kitchen debriefs. His eyes widened in recognition. "Miss Sterling," he said, his voice dropping in surprise. "I am so sorry, I didn't see you sitting here. Is everything—" I held up a hand to gently stop him. "It's perfectly all right, Julian. I'm just having a quiet family dinner." I turned my gaze to my family. They were staring, their faces blank masks of confusion. "Miss Sterling?" Jessica whispered. I smiled sweetly. "Chef Julian," I said, my voice resonating with newfound authority. "I'd like you to meet my family." I gestured to my mother. "This is my mother, Eleanor. My sister, Jessica." I then indicated my nieces, and my nieces Chloe and Mia. Julian nodded at each of them politely. I paused, letting the moment hang, then placed a protective hand on my son's shoulder. His frame felt so small beneath my touch. "And this," I said, my voice ringing with pride, "is my son, Leo." I looked back at Julian, ensuring my voice was loud enough for the neighboring tables to overhear. "Julian, I was just telling my family what a truly incredible job you and the team have done with the Nautilus." I glanced around the stunning, packed dining room. "It's my favorite restaurant in the entire city." I turned back to my family. Their faces were ashen. "Which is why," I said, my voice perfectly level and devastatingly clear, "I bought it." The silence that fell over the table was absolute. It was a heavy, dead air silence, broken only by the distant, muffled clinking of silverware from other diners, who were now pretending not to listen. Jessica's fork, laden with a piece of buttery lobster, was frozen an inch from her mouth. My mother's wine glass was suspended halfway to her lips. Jessica's mouth flapped open and closed, like a fish. "What?" she finally managed to choke out. Chef Julian's face remained a perfect mask of professional composure, but I could see in his eyes that he was watching me, waiting for his cue. "Yes, Jess," I said calmly. "I bought the Nautilus 18 months ago. I own this building. I own the kitchen. I own the very chairs you're sitting on." I smiled, a slow, deliberate smile. "Welcome to my restaurant." It wasn't just our table that had gone quiet. The whispers started rippling outwards. The nearby tables had fallen silent. They had heard the name Miss Sterling. They had seen the head chef of the city's top restaurant snap to attention. Now they were all watching the drama unfold. I saw Sarah, our server, standing by a service station, holding a silver tray. Her face was ghost white, her eyes wide with horror as she replayed the entire evening in her mind, the tap water, the extras comment. She looked at me, and I gave her a tiny, almost invisible nod to signal that she was fine, that this wasn't about her. I then turned my full, undivided attention back to my sister. Jessica was sputtering, her face a blotchy, unattractive red. "Rebecca, I had no idea. You never said anything. Why didn't you tell us?" That was always their question, wasn't it? "Tell you what, Jessica." I leaned forward, keeping my voice low but sharp as a shard of glass. "That I wasn't the abject failure you had all written me off as." I looked from her to my mother. "When, exactly, was I supposed to tell you? Should I have interrupted you while you were telling me how sad my little apartment was? Or maybe I should have brought it up when you were gifting me your stained hand-me-downs for my son. When, in the last decade, did either of you ever ask me a single meaningful question about my life?" Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "You never asked," I said, the simple truth landing with the weight of an anvil. "You never asked what I did for a living. You never asked how I was really doing. You were all so busy looking down on me that you never once bothered to actually look at me. You just assumed. You assumed I was still poor Becca, barely scraping by. You assumed you could waltz into this restaurant, my restaurant, and act like queens." I tilted my chin towards my son. "And you assumed you had the right to treat my child like he was less than human." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The raw truth was heavy enough. "When you arrived tonight," I continued, my voice dangerously soft, "you told my employee, Sarah over there, just tap water for him. We don't feed extras." I'm just going to let that sink in for a moment. You came into my place of business. You ordered my most expensive food and wine, and then you instructed my staff not to feed my son. Rebecca. My mother finally found her voice. It was a sharp, furious hiss. That is enough. You are making a terrible scene. People are staring. She was right. They were. I couldn't have cared less. My mother wasn't apologizing. She was trying to regain control, to protect her precious public image. She was embarrassed. I looked at my mother, at this woman who had spent my entire life making me feel small. A scene? I asked, a humorless laugh escaping my lips. You're worried about a scene? My whole life, the two of you have taught me to know my place. You taught me that in this family, there are main characters and there are extras. Jessica and her perfect daughters are the stars. And Leo and I, we're just the extras. I let my gaze drift from my mother's face to my sister's, both pale with shock and dawning shame. I smiled then, but it wasn't a nice smile. But you missed a very important part of the lesson. You forgot to tell me one little thing. I leaned in. Tonight, I said, the extras own the building. The silence in the restaurant was so thick I could almost feel it pressing in on me. Jessica's face was a mottled, ghastly shade of red. My mother, Eleanor, looked as if she'd seen a ghost, her mouth forming a small, tight O of disbelief. She was looking at me, but I knew she wasn't seeing her daughter Rebecca. She was seeing a social catastrophe, a crack running right down the center of her perfectly curated world. I turned away from their shock and their shame. It was their burden to carry now. I had carried mine for 39 years. I was done. I turned my full attention to Chef Julian, who had been standing by with the patience of a saint, a statue of pure professionalism. Julian, I said, and my voice was suddenly warm, the ice completely melted. I placed my hand on my son's back, feeling the slight frame of his shoulders under his shirt. He was still staring down at the table, utterly bewildered. My son would like to order now, I announced. I looked at Leo, and he looked up at me, his dark eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and fear. But beneath it all, I could see a tiny spark ignite. Leo, I said gently, you can have absolutely anything you want. What would you like? He looked from me to Chef Julian, this tall, important man in a starched white coat, and then over at his aunt, who looked like she was about to be physically ill. He swallowed hard, and his voice was barely a whisper. The lobster thermidor? He asked, phrasing it as a question, as if he still needed permission. A wave of love for this polite, gentle boy washed over me so intensely it almost buckled my knees. After the humiliation he'd endured, he was still asking. I nodded, my smile genuine. Yes, I said. Then I looked at Chef Julian, my voice firm and clear again. Chef, my son will have the lobster thermidor. Julian nodded, his expression serious. Right away, Ms. Sterling. Wait, I said as he began to turn. I wasn't finished. This wasn't just about getting him a meal. It was about erasing the insult, about overriding tap water and extras. I want the special reserve sides with that, I instructed. Julian's eyebrows lifted slightly. He knew what that meant. The black truffle macaroni and cheese, the grilled asparagus with the imported hollandaise, and the potato gratin made with aged Gruyere. A small, real smile touched Julian's lips. An excellent selection. And Julian, I added, please bring him your best off-menu creation. Whatever you're most proud of tonight, I want my son to experience it. I will prepare something special just for him, Ms. Sterling, Julian said, giving a slight bow of his head. It will be my pleasure. He turned and strode back towards the kitchen, not just walking, but moving with a renewed sense of purpose. I turned back to the table. The four of them, Jessica, Eleanor, Chloe, and Mia, were just sitting there, staring. They hadn't touched their own $100 lobsters, which were now growing cold and congealed on their plates. "Rebecca," my mother tried again, her voice trembling with barely suppressed rage. This is so wasteful. It's childish." "Is it?" I asked, picking up my water glass. "I thought it was just dinner." "You're trying to humiliate us." "I'm not trying to do anything," I replied calmly. "I'm just turning on the lights." "You're the ones doing the humiliating." You bitch," Jessica hissed, the word laced with pure venom. I just looked at her, feeling not anger, but a profound sense of exhaustion. "You called my 15-year-old son an extra, Jessica. You told him he couldn't have a piece of bread. You did it in a crowded room to make yourself feel powerful. You did it in my restaurant." I set my glass down with a soft click. "So call me whatever name you want. I am done. We are done." We sat in that awful, frigid silence for what felt like an eternity. The other tables had resumed their meals, but it was a pretense. I could feel their eyes on us. Then the kitchen doors swung open. It wasn't just one server this time. It was a procession of three, led by Chef Julian himself. Sarah was right behind him, followed by another server I knew named Ben. They approached our table like a royal retinue. "If you could please make some room," Julian said, his voice directed not at me but at Jessica. She and her daughters scrambled to move their designer purses and bread plates out of the way as the team began to set a new place setting in front of Leo. First, Julian himself placed a massive steaming lobster thermidor before him. I knew instantly he had chosen the largest one from the tank. Next, Sarah set down 3 large steaming bowls. "The black truffle macaroni and cheese," she announced, "the potato gratin, the grilled asparagus." Finally, Ben stepped forward, holding a plate with a polished silver cloche. "And from the chef," he said, lifting the dome to reveal a perfectly seared cut of foie gras resting on a brioche toast point, drizzled with a dark cherry reduction. It was the most decadent and expensive appetizer on our menu. The empty space in front of my son was gone, replaced by an overflowing feast fit for a king. Leo stared at the spread, his eyes as wide as the platters. He looked at me, and I smiled, leaning in close so only he could hear. "Eat as much as you want, sweetheart," I whispered. "It's your restaurant, too." Leo picked up his fork, still a little hesitant. "Go on," I encouraged him. "Start with the lobster." He took the small fork, dug into the rich filling, and brought it to his lips. His eyes fluttered closed for a second, and then a real, genuine 15-year-old boy's smile spread across his face. "It's good, Mom," he said. "I know," I replied. I watched him eat, trying the mac and cheese, then the fancy dish from the chef. He ate with focus and quiet joy. He was no longer an extra. He was the only person at the table who mattered. Across from us, my sister Jessica slowly put her fork down, pushing her own cold, forgotten lobster away. She couldn't eat. My mother was just staring blankly at her hands. I watched my son eat the best meal of his life, surrounded by the very people who had tried to deny him a piece of bread. It was a terrible, beautiful, and triumphant moment, and it was entirely mine. Leo ate with the slow, deliberate focus of a teenage boy finally allowed to be hungry. He finished every last bite of the lobster. He devoured almost all the macaroni and cheese. He even gave the asparagus a valiant effort, though he made a small face. I watched him the entire time, my attention solely on him. I didn't spare a glance for my sister or my mother. In that moment, they had ceased to exist. The rest of the table was a wasteland of cold, half-eaten entrees and full wine glasses. The silence was no longer just tense. It was thick with resentment and the unspoken acknowledgement of a deep, permanent wound. When Leo was finally finished, he sat back and placed his napkin on the table. "I'm full, Mom," he said quietly. "Good," I replied. I finally looked up and met their gazes. They looked like 4 miserable statues, frozen in their shame. This was the end. It was time to leave. I stood up, and my chair made a quiet scraping sound on the polished wood floor. It was a sound of finality. Leo stood up with me. Jessica looked up at me, her eyes red-rimmed. "Rebecca," she said, her voice weak and reedy. "Where are you going?" "We're leaving, Jessica." "What? What about—" She trailed off, confused. "What about dessert? What about pretending none of this ever happened?" "The celebration is over," I said plainly. I looked at my mother. "You two are welcome to stay, have dessert, rehash the scene I made. But we're going." "Rebecca, please," my mother pleaded, trying to sound authoritative, but her voice cracked. "Don't do this. We are family." That word, family, I almost laughed out loud. "Family?" I repeated, my voice incredulous. "Is that what this is? You sit here and watch your own daughter call your grandson an extra. You watch as he's denied a piece of bread and you say nothing. You care more about what the strangers at the other tables think than about your own flesh and blood. That isn't family, Mother. That is just sad." I turned to Jessica. "And you? You wanted to treat me to a nice dinner. You wanted to show me how the other half lives so you could feel superior. You needed me to be poor Rebecca so you could be successful, Jessica." I let that sink in. "Well, you got your wish," I said. "You're at the Nautilus. It doesn't get much nicer than this." I paused. Then I asked the question that had been waiting in the wings all night. "The total for your portion of the table," I said, my voice calm and conversational, "is about $500. Not including my son's meal, of course. That's on the house." I looked from Jessica to my mother. "Should I have the whole thing comped as a family discount? Or—" and here I allowed a small, sharp smile to form, "would you like to pay for your own meal?" This was the real test. This was the boundary being drawn in permanent ink. All the color drained from Jessica's face, leaving it a sickly, pale white. I, she stammered. I just assumed." "You assumed I would pay," I finished for her. "You assumed I would just absorb it all. You assumed you could insult me, belittle my child, and that I would still be so pathetically grateful for the invitation that I'd pick up your $500 tab. The same way you assumed my son didn't deserve to eat." We don't have that kind of money on us," my mother blurted out, the words a desperate, panicked cry. And there it was, the other truth. Their perfect life was a facade, a house of cards. They had come to my restaurant expecting me, the failure, the charity case, to finance their lavish feast. Any pity I might have felt was fleeting, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. "Then maybe," I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper, "you should have ordered more modestly." I looked directly at Jessica. "Like you told my son to." I let the words land, watched them hit her like a physical blow. I saw her flinch. It was over. I turned and saw Sarah standing a few feet away, trying to look busy. I gestured to her. "Sarah," I said, my voice back to being professional and composed, "please bring the check to this table." Sarah nodded. "Yes, ma'am." I turned back to my family one last time. "Good night, Mother." "Good night, Jessica." I put my hand on Leo's back. "Let's go, honey." I didn't look back. I just walked away, my son walking tall and quiet beside me. I heard my mother call my name one last time. "Rebecca." It wasn't a plea. It was a command. I kept walking. We moved through the main dining room, and I could feel the eyes of every other patron on my back. They had witnessed the entire drama, the extra being fed a king's feast, the powerful family being left with the bill. But I didn't feel embarrassed. For the first time in my life, walking away from my family, I felt nothing but pride. I felt like the main character. I pushed open the heavy glass doors of the restaurant, and we stepped out into the cool night air, leaving the whispers and the tension behind us, trapped at that table with the cold lobster and the $500 bill. I didn't lead Leo to the car in the main lot. Instead, I put my hand on his shoulder and steered him to the left, down a quiet, private hallway away from the public entrance. "Where are we going, Mom?" he asked. "To my office," I said, "but we're making a quick stop first." I led him to a heavy, unmarked wood door and used my personal key to open it. We stepped into the chef's table, the restaurant's most exclusive private dining room. It was a beautiful, intimate space, paneled in dark, rich wood, with a single, perfectly set round table for two at its center. The thick walls blocked out all the noise from the main dining room, creating a bubble of profound peace. "Have a seat, honey," I said. Leo sat down, looking around in awe. "Wow, this is really nice." "It is," I agreed. "I have a lot of important meetings in here, but tonight it's all for us." I picked up the internal phone on the wall and dialed the kitchen. "Julian," I said. "Yes, Ms. Sterling. Could you please send up 2 of the molten chocolate lava cakes? And 2 large glasses of the good whole milk." "Right away," he replied. I hung up and sat down across from my son. The silence in the room was warm and safe, the complete opposite of the toxic silence at the other table. We just sat there for a moment, and I looked at my son, really looked at him. He seemed older than he had just a few hours ago. He had handled the evening with a quiet grace that humbled me. He was the one who finally spoke. "Mom," he said, his eyes fixed on the tablecloth, "why did Aunt Jess call me an extra?" He asked it so simply, a genuine question from a kid who couldn't comprehend how an adult, his own aunt, could be so needlessly cruel. I sighed, reaching across the table to take his hand in mine. "Oh, honey," I said softly, "that has absolutely nothing to do with you and everything to do with her. I don't get it. Some people, Leo," I explained, "they have this deep need to feel big. And for some of them, the only way they know how to feel big is by making other people feel small. They see the world like it's a movie, and they've decided they are the star, the main character. That means in their eyes, everyone else is just an extra, just background." "But we're family," he said, his voice full of confusion. "To people like your aunt and your grandma," I said sadly. "Even family is a competition. It's about who's winning, who has more money, who has the more successful kids, who looks the most perfect on the outside. Tonight, they were trying to prove that they were winning and that I was losing." "But you're not," he said, his voice gaining strength. "You own this whole place. They were eating your food." I smiled. "I know, and they know that now too. But for a very long time, baby, they treated me like an extra too. When I was a kid, and especially after I had you, they decided I was a failure. They liked me that way. It made them feel better about their own lives." "That's stupid," he declared. I let out a real, genuine laugh. It felt good. "Yeah," I said, "it is stupid. It's a sad way to live your life." I squeezed his hand. "But you listen to me. You are not an extra, Leo. You are not a background character. You are the main character of your own story." And you are the most important person in my story. Do you understand that? He nodded, his eyes clear and steady as he looked at me. Yeah, I get it. The door opened softly and Sarah came in, carrying a tray with 2 steaming lava cakes, each topped with a scoop of vanilla bean ice cream and 2 tall glasses of milk. She set them down and looked at me, her eyes full of a newfound respect. Will there be anything else, Miss Sterling? No, Sarah, this is perfect. Thank you, I said. You can head home for the night. You handled yourself perfectly this evening. She smiled, a real grateful smile. Thank you. Good night, ma'am. Good night, Leo. Good night, Leo replied. She left, closing the door quietly behind her. We were alone again. We dug into our dessert, and we laughed. We talked about his school, about a movie we both wanted to see. We didn't mention Jessica or Eleanor again. They weren't in this room. Their negativity wasn't allowed in this room. This space was for us. It was quiet, peaceful, and it was the best meal I had ever had in my life. We ate our dessert slowly. Through the small one-way glass window in the door, I had a clear view out into the main restaurant. Leo and I were safe in our quiet bubble, but I could still see the chaos we had left behind. I could see our old table. Sarah had delivered the bill. My mother was holding it as if it were a venomous snake. Jessica was on her feet, waving her hands, her face contorted in anger as she yelled at my mother, who was yelling right back. I couldn't hear their words, but I didn't need to. I knew the script. How could you let her do this to us? This is all your fault. What are we supposed to do now? I don't have this kind of money. You're the one who had to order the lobster. It was ugly. It was exactly who they were. They weren't sorry they had hurt my son. They were furious they had been caught and held accountable. I watched them, feeling not anger, not even satisfaction, but a strange sense of detachment. It was like watching a silent film. They were just 2 small, angry people, their gestures frantic and meaningless. What are they doing, Mom? Leo asked, having noticed them too. They're arguing, I said simply. They're deciding who has to pay the bill. Is Aunt Jess really not going to pay? Oh, she'll pay, I said with certainty. She's too proud not to. She cares far too much about what other people think. And I was right. After a few more minutes of their ugly, silent pantomime, Jessica snatched the billfold from my mother, threw her credit card down on the table, and crossed her arms. Sarah, who had been waiting patiently nearby, swooped in and took the card. A few moments later, she returned. Jessica scribbled an angry signature on the receipt. Then they stood, gathered their belongings, and walked towards the exit. My nieces looked like they wanted to evaporate. My mother and sister didn't look at each other. They didn't look proud. They didn't look like winners. They just looked small. We stayed in our private room for a while longer, letting the restaurant clear out. After about 20 minutes, there was a soft knock. It was Sarah, with her coat on. "I'm sorry to bother you, Miss Sterling." "It's no bother, Sarah." "What's up?" "I just wanted to let you know. They paid the bill in full, and they've left." "Thank you," I said. Sarah hesitated, looking uncomfortable. They also asked me to tell you something." I waited. "They asked me to tell you that they're sorry." I looked at this kind young woman who worked for me, and I felt a fresh wave of disappointment in my family. They had used her as their messenger, unable to deliver even an apology themselves. "Did they say it to me, Sarah?" I asked gently. "Or did they say it to you to pass along?" Her face said it all. "Through me, ma'am." I nodded slowly. "Then it doesn't count. A real apology, Sarah, is when someone looks you in the eye and owns what they did. They're not sorry for what they did. They're sorry because I own this restaurant. They're sorry they got embarrassed. That's not an apology, it's damage control." Sarah nodded, understanding completely. "Yes, ma'am." She paused. "For what it's worth," she said, her voice quiet but firm. That was incredible. I've worked in this business a long time. I've seen families like that before. They had it coming." I looked at her, a good employee and a good person. "No one deserves to be humiliated, Sarah," I said softly. "Not even them. But they did need a lesson in boundaries." "Well," she said with a small smile, "I think class is officially over. Good night, Miss Sterling." "Good night, Sarah. Get home safe." She closed the door, and I was alone with Leo again. "Mom, why did you say that? That they didn't deserve to be humiliated?" "Because it's true," I said. "I know what that feels like. They spent my whole life making me feel that way. It's an awful, corrosive feeling. I didn't enjoy doing that to them, Leo. I did it because I had to. I did it to protect you and to protect myself. Sometimes the only way to stop a bully is to stand up and say very clearly, 'No, not anymore.'" He nodded, a deep understanding in his eyes. "Okay," I said, finally standing up. "I think we're done here. Let's go home." We left our peaceful sanctuary, walked through the now empty hallway, and took a private elevator down to the parking garage. We got in my car. We were safe. We drove home through the sleeping city, the streetlights blurring past the windows. The car was quiet, but it was a comfortable silence, the shared silence of two people who had weathered a storm together and come out stronger on the other side. We were a team. Leo was staring out his window. "Mom?" He broke the silence. "Yeah, honey? Did you really buy 3 restaurants?" I smiled. "I did. This one and 2 smaller bistros downtown." "Wow," he said, shaking his head slightly. "That's pretty cool." He was quiet for another minute, processing it all, seeing me in a new light. I wasn't just mom anymore. I was a person, a boss, a woman who owned the building. "You know," he said, his voice soft, "Grandma Rose would have been really, really proud of you." My heart seized. I hadn't thought about my father's mother, my Grandma Rose, in years. She was the one who taught me how to bake, the one who always believed in me. She was the absolute opposite of my mother, Eleanor, warm, kind, and tough as nails. She had passed away when Leo was just a toddler. "You remember Grandma Rose?" I asked, my voice thick. "A little," he said. "I remember she smelled like cinnamon, and she always let me stir the batter. And I remember," he paused, "that she always stood up for you. When Grandma Eleanor was being mean, tears pricked my eyes, and I had to blink them away to see the road." "Yeah, honey," I whispered. She did. I could see her now, in her warm, flour-dusted kitchen. "Don't you let them make you small, Rebecca girl," she used to tell me. "Your mother and your sister, they're all polish and no shine. You're all shine. Don't you ever let them dull you." I had let them dull me for so long, but I wasn't dull anymore. "She would have loved watching you eat that lobster tonight," I said, managing a small laugh. Leo grinned, turning to look at me. "Yeah, she would have," he agreed. "But I think she'd have loved watching you tell Aunt Jess off even more." I laughed, a real full-throated laugh. "You are probably right about that." We pulled into our driveway. I turned off the engine, and the garage went dark. I looked at my son. "I'm so proud of you, Leo," I said. "You were so strong tonight." "I was scared," he admitted. "I know. Being brave isn't about not being scared. It's about being scared and standing up straight anyway. For so long, I had accepted the place they gave me. I thought my place was to be small. My place was to be the extra." I looked at my house, thought about my restaurants, and then looked at my beautiful, kind, strong son. Some people are told to know their place, I thought quietly to myself. Leo looked at me. "What, Mom?" I smiled at him, and some of us, I said, learned to own the whole building. We got out of the car and went inside. The house was quiet. And for the first time in 39 years, I felt a sense of profound peace. It was the peace that comes when a long, painful war is finally over. I was full. My son was full. Our hearts were full, and no one could ever take that away from us again.